My name's Claire Mitchell. I'm 38 years old, living in Charleston, South Carolina, and I just ended a 15-year marriage in a way no one could have imagined. Right in the middle of a bachelorette party, where my husband didn't show up as a guest, but as the surprise gift dressed as a fake dancer for the bride-to-be. But what left everyone truly speechless wasn't his tearaway pants. It was the moment I walked into that room with the bride's fiancé, her parents, and a thick folder full of secrets they had been hiding for nearly a year. If you've ever suspected someone you love is hiding something from you, what would you do? Keep believing or start following the clues? Let me tell you everything. And if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, share your story in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel, because what I'm about to reveal makes that night look tame. I used to think I had a peaceful marriage, not perfect but solid. Nathan and I met when I was 23, just starting out at a small advertising agency in Atlanta. He was 6 years older, already a creative director, smart, charismatic, and always seemed to have the right answers in a pitch meeting. I loved how he saw the world as a logic puzzle, while I was all emotion and instinct. He once said, "We're two halves of a whole," and I truly believed him. When Nathan's mom passed away during our 3rd year together, I took 6 months off work to stay home, handle the arrangements, and care for him. He fell into a deep depression, barely eating, barely speaking. I spent nights lying on the floor next to his bed because he said he couldn't sleep if someone was higher up than him. When he finally began to recover, we decided to leave Atlanta and start fresh in Charleston. I turned down an offer to be creative director at a major agency in New York because he didn't want to leave the South. "I need stability," he said, "and I need you." I didn't regret it. I loved him. And I believed love required sacrifice. We bought a small house, painted the walls mint green, and planted lavender in the front yard. I designed the interiors, and Nathan started his own financial consulting firm, from scratch. The early years were tight. I worked extra hours at a law office during the day and freelanced as a logo designer at night. But I never complained. In fact, I was proud. I was helping my husband build his dream. Then Nathan's firm started to take off. He got busier, had sudden business trips and dinner meetings with clients that lasted late into the night. I noticed, but I didn't ask. I had always been the kind of wife who didn't check his phone, didn't get jealous, didn't ask too many questions. I believed that the moment you start doubting, you're already poisoning your own trust. One time I joked, "So, got yourself another woman yet?" Nathan laughed, pulled me into a hug, and whispered, "No one could ever replace you." I smiled, turned around, and kept folding shirts into his suitcase. He was heading to Phoenix for a meeting with healthcare partners. I didn't know that trip was the first time he and Brooke spent the night together at a lakeside resort. And I had no idea that night would mark the beginning of a carefully planned affair. Not out of love, but because they wanted to escape their current lives together. I had no clue. I still brought homemade muffins to his office each month, still posted married life photos on Instagram with a genuine smile, thinking I was lucky to have a man like Nathan. I remember clearly that spring afternoon last year, sitting alone in the living room reviewing a campaign proposal I'd drafted for an arts conference. Nathan came home, kissed me on the forehead, and went straight to his office. I told him about my idea for interactive lighting in the exhibit, my eyes lighting up like a kid showing off a good grade. He nodded, "Sounds cool," and turned away, still typing on his phone. I didn't know that at that exact moment, he was texting Brooke. "She's talking about lighting. All I'm thinking about is this morning with you." I only saw those texts later, by chance, when a notification popped up on the iPad as I was searching for a mushroom pasta recipe. I froze. Picked it up, scrolled, and scrolled, until something in me collapsed into a hollow, silent void. 14 years? How many dinners had I waited for him alone? How many family events had I attended by myself because he was in a meeting? How many lies had slipped past his lips and my trust, without leaving a trace? I used to think if Nathan ever cheated, I'd lose it, throw things, scream, but instead I felt nothing. Nothing. I slid down onto the kitchen floor, resting my head against the fridge, colder than the ice inside. And I knew, the worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was realizing I had lived too long inside a lie I thought was real. I don't know what made me get up that night to check the tax files. Maybe it was instinct. Or just the habit of someone who tries to keep life tidy and transparent, especially past 35, in a marriage that seemed steady. I was reviewing the itemized transactions from our accountant. My eyes were skimming out of habit until they stopped at a name I didn't recognize. Marston Group, LLC. It wasn't any client Nathan had ever mentioned, not a friend's company, not anything familiar from our 14 years of joint financial planning. But what chilled me wasn't the name, it was the frequency. Same transaction, monthly. Each withdrawal over $7,000. I opened more bank statements, transfers from our joint investment account, same destination, Marston Group LLC, nearly $80,000 in less than a year. I thought about calling Nathan, but something stopped me. I walked to the kitchen and reached for a glass of water, and then, as if fate itself was mocking me, our shared iPad lit up on the counter. The one we used for recipes and YouTube videos. A message popped up from Brooke, wedding planning. Counting down to tomorrow night, baby. Bridesmaids and the stripper are all set. I froze. The glass dropped to the floor, shattering in two. My heart pounded fast and heavy. I unlocked the iPad with my fingerprint, still registered like always. Messages appeared that I'd never seen before. Not congratulations or normal wedding plans. These were blurry, suggestive, tangled between Bachelorette ideas and something else entirely. Can't wait to perform for you. Think the wedding would be hotter with a few stolen memories? Remember that night at the Nashville pool? I scrolled quickly. Photos loaded, a hotel room, a familiar back, a blurry image of Brooke leaning on Nathan's shoulder. Caption below. We'll find a way to tell them after the wedding, I promise. I gripped the iPad so tightly my fingers went numb. I walked to the small office where Nathan usually worked, opened the old laptop he hadn't used much lately. I knew the password. His mother's birthday. Opened his email, a secondary inbox popped up, already logged in, and I stepped into another world, one I was never invited to. Hotel invoices from Greenville, Nashville, and Chicago, where I once asked, "Why didn't you take me with you?" and got, "It was too short a trip, you'd be exhausted." Lease documents for a luxury apartment near downtown Chicago, under Marston Group LLC. A voice memo, accidentally saved by our smart assistant at home. Nathan on speakerphone with someone. She has no clue. Still believes I'm doing this for our future. Still the same voice. Still the man I once thought would grow old with me. That was the moment I knew there was no choice left but the truth. I printed everything I could. No need to organize, just proof. I picked up my phone, opened LinkedIn. Searched. Lucas Anderson, civil engineer. The first message I sent, my hands were ice. Sorry to bother you. I'm Claire, Nathan Mitchell's wife. I have something important to tell you about your fiancé. 30 minutes later, Lucas called back, and when he asked, "Do you have proof?" I said, "I have everything, including things you never imagined." I sent him screenshots of messages, hotel photos, overlapping travel dates. Silence hung for nearly a minute after he finished going through them. Finally, he exhaled. I suspected, but I had no evidence. Brooke, she's changed lately. Always hiding her phone, always disappearing without explanation. But I told myself it was just wedding stress. I didn't say a word. That same sentence had once been mine. How many times had I lied to myself just to hold on to trust? I don't want to cause a scene, he continued, but I can't stay silent either. Then let's not stay silent, I replied. Do you know where her parents are? Gardenia Hotel, 4th floor, he answered. They just arrived yesterday to meet with the floral designer. I drove there that afternoon. Dressed in dark jeans and a beige coat, I approached the front desk and asked to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds. They agreed, though their eyes were wary as I stepped into the room. I didn't make small talk. I opened my phone and showed them the messages, the photos, the hotel bookings, and matching invoices. Mr. Reynolds held the phone, flipping through each item, stone silent. Mrs. Reynolds covered her mouth with one hand, her rosary beads trembling slightly in the other. Brooke, she's already engaged. She chose a church. She wrote her vows, she murmured. And this man, He pointed at Nathan in one of the pictures. He's my husband. We can't let this continue. My daughter's a grown woman, she can make her own choices, she said weakly. She can, he replied, but she also has to live with the consequences. Lucas arrived at the hotel an hour later. When he stepped into the room, he avoided looking at the bride's parents. He looked only at me, then gave a small nod. Are you sure you want to confront this at the Bachelorette party? I asked. Lucas gave a flat smile, empty of joy. I'm not sure about anything anymore. But I can't walk into a marriage built on a lie. And so, in that heavy silence, we made a plan. I was clear. I don't want to make a scene. I'm not here to scream or lose control. I just want the truth. And she needs to hear the truth from the people she never thought would have the courage to say it, Lucas added. We agreed. I would lead. Lucas would step in if things spiraled. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds would stay in the background, not interfere but speak if needed. At 8 p.m. sharp, we met outside Bella Vista. No one spoke in the car. I drove. Lucas sat beside me. Brooke's parents were in the back seat. The only sounds were the hum of the A/C and the soft clicking of Mrs. Reynolds' rosary beads. I spotted the venue from a distance. Glittering lights, music spilling out, women laughing, each sound slicing across my chest like a blade. I slowly turned off the engine, opened the car door, and took a deep breath. I stood in the middle of the elegant party room, a half-finished glass of champagne at Brooke's feet, nearly 20 women staring at me like I had just ruined a joyful night. But I didn't feel guilty. Not tonight. Not after staying silent for too long. Nathan remained motionless, lips drawn thin, eyes darting around in search of an ally. But this room now belonged to strangers. Brooke wouldn't even look at him. Her bridesmaids were retreating toward the walls, as if afraid they'd be caught in the storm too. I placed my handbag on the dessert table, next to the tiered cupcakes, and pulled out a navy moon folder stamped with the logo of the accounting firm Nathan and I had used for years. You think this is just about an affair, I said, my voice calm but clear. No, this is a full-blown betrayal, marital and legal. I opened the folder, revealing printed investment statements, each page marked with red pen. Marston Group LLC. Ring a bell, Nathan? He swallowed hard, stepping back half a pace. Claire, don't do this here. Why? I stared into his eyes. Because you're ashamed? Or because these people shouldn't know that you created a shell company under a fake name and have been moving money from our retirement account into a private fund to finance your second life? I turned to Brooke, still frozen in her seat. Did you know, I asked, that the apartment Nathan leased in Chicago, the one you were supposed to move into after your wedding, was paid for with my money? Brooke looked up, eyes wide, no more tears left to fall. No, I thought... You thought what? I cut in. That he was financially independent? That his tiny consulting firm suddenly took off and could afford a luxury apartment, weekend resorts, and the designer gifts you've been flaunting? I held up a photo of a business credit card statement. Restaurant in Nashville, hotel in Savannah, trip to Phoenix, he labeled them all client meetings, but the client was you. A champagne glass slipped from one of the bridesmaids' hands, shattering on the floor. I used to trust Nathan more than I trusted myself, I said slowly. I stayed through his mother's death, juggled 2 jobs, to help him build his firm from the ground up, turned down the biggest opportunity of my career because I believed building a family took sacrifice. I looked back at Nathan. And in return, you used that trust to build an entire second life behind my back. You could have had an affair, Nathan. People do that. But you went beyond. You lied. You stole what we built. Not just to love someone else, but to start over while I was still in the dark. Silence settled over the room like the first frost of winter. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat, speaking slowly but firmly. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think this wedding will take place, and if anything needs to be cancelled, I'll take care of it. We'll inform the priest, Mrs. Reynolds added, and Brooke, her voice broke, you need to prepare to leave our home. My eyes found Brooke. No screams, no pleading, just a quiet bow of her head. One of the bridesmaids, clearly her closest, stepped forward, removed the bride-to-be sash from Brooke's shoulder, placed it gently on the table, and turned away. I glanced around the room. Once decorated to celebrate a new beginning, now the wreckage of a humiliating end. Brooke collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands, sobs rushing out uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, I didn't think it would end like this," she wept. Oh. Lucas stood still for a long moment. Then he slipped off his silver ring, placing it quietly on the table, right beside the wedding cake sample they had tasted together 3 weeks ago. "This ends here, Brooke." His voice was hoarse but clear. "I'll call the church, the priest, everyone. You don't have to do anything else, because there will be no wedding." Brooke shook her head, reaching out. "Lucas, please." I pulled another document from my bag, the lease agreement for an apartment under the name Marston Group LLC, the shell company Nathan used to siphon money from our investment account. The apartment costs over $3,000 a month, 6-month deposit, renovation fees, interior designer costs, all paid from the retirement fund I've been building for the past 14 years. Total, I looked at Brooke, then at Nathan, $180,000. A wave of murmurs rippled through the bridesmaids. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, I don't even have that much in my lifetime savings." Nathan stepped forward, his voice strained but trying to stay calm. "Claire, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I laughed, for the first time that night, but there was no joy in it, only a sharp, icy contempt. "What are you going to say? That I misunderstood the amount? Misread the receipts? Misinterpreted the bank documents that have your signature on them?" I turned to face the entire room. After I saw the first signs, I didn't explode. I didn't throw anything. I didn't interrogate him. I hired a forensic accountant, someone who specializes in uncovering financial fraud in marriages. I pulled out a small envelope and placed it on the table. "It's all in here. Transfer records, misuse of company credit cards, corporate emails Nathan used to book hotel rooms for his meetings with Brooke." I took a deep breath. "I've already moved half our joint assets into a personal account Nathan can't access. I've also hired an attorney and prepared legal paperwork, including a divorce petition, and, if necessary, a lawsuit for marital financial fraud." Nathan turned pale. "You can't do this," he whispered. I'm entitled to part of that." I looked straight into his eyes that had once been my anchor, now the face of a stranger. "Your part," I said slowly, "was spent on hotel bedsheets and expensive wine used to lull your mistress, while I was home working overtime to pay the mortgage." I thought that would be enough to end the night. But there was still one part of the truth I hadn't brought forward. The part that didn't just fracture a marriage, but could collapse the very career Nathan had spent years building. And this time, I wasn't alone. In the tense silence of the party room, the wooden door at the end of the hallway suddenly opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped in, his expression stern. Heads turned. Brooke looked up, her face still streaked with tears. Nathan nearly froze. "Ethan," he choked out, "what are you doing here?" I stepped aside to make room for the man approaching. "Because I called him," I said. "Ethan Cole, CEO of the National Healthcare Finance Company where Nathan works. Also an old classmate of mine from Duke Business School." Ethan didn't look at Nathan right away. He scanned the room first, shattered glass, stunned faces, then rested his gaze on me. "I'm sorry it had to come to this, Claire," he said quietly. "But you were right. This isn't just personal." He stepped toward Nathan, his voice calm but firm. "We had a meeting last month about ethics policies, remember? You signed a declaration affirming you had no romantic relationships with anyone under your direct supervision." Nathan stammered. I didn't think. She's not technically on my team. Brooke was assigned to you as an intern under standard departmental structure." Ethan held up a sheet. I recognized it as a copy of Brooke's internship agreement signed by Nathan. "And for 6 months, not only did you fail to disclose the relationship, but you also used company funds to pay for multiple trips unrelated to business." Brooke covered her face, trembling. "I thought you said the company would never find out," she whispered. Wouldn't know, Ethan repeated, until Claire sent me the itemized records, and honestly, even if I wanted to turn a blind eye because of old friendship, the evidence was undeniable. Nathan looked at me, his expression no longer angry, just devastated. You really sent it to him? Ethan continued, this time addressing the entire room. Our company manages healthcare assets. Millions of dollars from public health programs. Leadership roles like Nathan's are held to the highest ethical standards. And when violations occur, the matter is referred to the Federal Professional Ethics Board for license review. Brooke looked like the blood had drained from her body. She turned to Nathan. You said you'd protect me. You said you'd take care of it. You're in violation too, Ethan said coldly. Engaging in a relationship with your direct supervisor during your internship breaches policy. Your file will be suspended and you could be barred from working in healthcare finance for at least 3 years. The party room now felt like a courtroom, except the defendant had brought every piece of evidence in with him. Ethan's eyes settled on Nathan one last time. Tomorrow morning, report to the office with your laptop, ID badge, and company phone. Your access was revoked the moment I walked in. Nathan could barely speak. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But I knew this storm wasn't over. What I had done wasn't for revenge. It was to sever the decaying cord that had tied me to someone no longer worthy. Mrs. Reynolds sank into a chair by the window, hands trembling as she clutched her rosary, staring at Brooke like she no longer recognized the daughter she'd raised for nearly 30 years. Brooke, her voice broke. You are the granddaughter of a pastor. Your grandfather stood at the pulpit for over 4 decades, preaching about faithfulness and honor. Your aunt is a nun. No one in our family has ever had to bow their head in shame like this. She gripped the beads like someone trying to hold on to something slipping away. Brooke didn't lift her head. She sat still, hands clenched together as if wishing she could disappear. Mr. Reynolds, still standing tall, pulled his phone from his suit pocket. I'm calling Father McKinley, he said, voice steady but sharp, letting him know there will be no wedding next weekend, and if needed, I'll inform the entire vendor list. Would you like to personally call the photographer, the band, and the caterer, Brooke? Dad, please. Brooke sobbed. Don't cancel everything. I can fix this. No. He cut her off, not shouting, but so clear and final that no one dared interrupt. What needs canceling isn't the party, it's the fantasy you've built around yourself. The air in the room thickened, as if every sound had been swallowed by the harsh, cold truth. My eyes moved from Brooke to Lucas, searching for something neither of them could give. I had planned to keep this next part to myself, but when I saw Lucas clenching his jaw, holding himself together by a thread, I knew he deserved the whole truth. I wasn't going to say this, I began quietly, but maybe Lucas should know everything. Brooke's head snapped up, her tear-gulled eyes widening as if she instinctively sensed what was coming. 3 weeks ago, I continued, while reviewing Nathan's financial activity, I came across loan documents tied to her family, 3 short-term mortgages, and a rejected credit application due to delinquent payments. I turned to Lucas. Did you know her family is on the brink of bankruptcy? That you and your wedding were their last hope for securing new investment capital? Lucas froze like someone had just punched the air out of his lungs. No, that can't be, he whispered. We never talked about money like that. Not directly, I said, but indirectly, all the time. Didn't the two of you discuss merging finances after the wedding? Didn't Brooke mention she wanted to take time off to reset emotionally? Didn't her parents suddenly start showering you with warmth after years of ignoring her love life? Mrs. Reynolds broke into tears, but not from heartbreak, from knowing there was nothing left to deny. We didn't think it would come to this, she said softly. Lucas is a good man. He was a chance for her to have a decent husband. A better future. Through deceit? Lucas asked, his voice no longer angry, just shattered. Using me as a financial escape route, while still sleeping with a married man? Brooke dropped to her knees, face buried in the carpet. It wasn't about money. I didn't think it would go this far. Mr. Reynolds stepped forward and placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. "Let's go," he said. "There's nothing left to say." He cast one last look at Brooke, not in anger, not in disappointment, but in quiet surrender. Like a man placing the final flower on the grave of something once sacred. Mrs. Reynolds rose and followed him. She didn't look back. But I saw her hand clutching the rosary, not as a prayer for salvation, but as a final farewell to something beyond saving. The door closed behind them. In the room, all that remained was the sound of shaky breaths, the occasional clink of glass on the floor, and a woman kneeling alone, stripped not only of her wedding, but of her family. And the belief that deceit could ever go unpunished. The room felt like it had hit rock bottom. I knew there was still one layer left, the deepest, most rotten part, untouched. I hadn't planned to use it. At first I had kept it out of instinct. But seeing Brooke still on the floor, repeating "it wasn't like that," and Nathan frozen in the corner, I knew if I didn't say it, they'd keep denying, keep living inside the half-truths they'd built to silence their own guilt. I stepped into the center of the room, took out my phone, and opened a saved audio file. This was recorded last week, accidentally, by the smart assistant in our home, which is still linked to Nathan's email, I said. "I've already sent it to my lawyer, but now I want all of you to hear it. So there will be no more excuses." I hit play. Nathan's voice came first, over speaker, low, deliberate, and unmistakable. "We'll wait until after the wedding. A couple months later you'll say it just isn't working. Peaceful breakup, and I'll leave Claire like I promised, quietly." Brooke's voice followed, hesitant. "But Lucas, he's a good man. I feel so guilty." "That's why you'll be gentle. And I'll get the finances sorted. Move to Chicago, we'll start over. No one will suspect." "What if Claire suspects?" "She won't. She trusts me too much. She always has." Nathan's laughter at the end made my skin crawl, even though I'd listened to the recording dozens of times. I stopped the file. For a few seconds the room was dead silent. Brooke exhaled like someone had been hit with ice water. She stood up abruptly, eyes burning red. "That's fake. You edited that. I never—" "Are you sure?" Lucas interrupted, for the first time no longer protecting his feelings. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and placed it in front of her. "And then what about this message?" Brooke looked down at the screen, her own words bold and undeniable. "Tonight is the first step. I choose you. Forever." Sent at 9:02 a.m. this morning. Brooke stumbled backward, lips trembling. I was confused. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Lucas let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't mean to?" So the hotel stays in Nashville and Phoenix were what, stress relief? And the fully leased apartment in Chicago to start fresh? That was a coincidence too? I stepped closer, eyes fixed on both of them. This wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated. Every step. You crafted a plan slick enough to avoid suspicion, then pretended to be sorry once caught. But let's be honest. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught too early. Brooke started crying. But this time, no more dramatic sobs. Just broken, guttural gasps, like someone who had finally hit the bottom and had nowhere left to hold on. Nathan remained paralyzed, eyes vacant, like a man finally realizing he'd burned every bridge behind him. I faced them, the pair who once believed they were clever, careful, untouchable, now standing in the wreckage of a room filled with witnesses, old friends, and the shattered remains of a future they destroyed with their own hands. 6 months later, I was sitting on the back porch of a tiny log cabin deep in the Vermont pines, holding a mug of cold coffee, watching the last light of the day spill golden and soft across the lake. The glass had stopped breaking, the messages no longer came, and the nights weren't battles anymore. Just wind, dry leaves, and birdsong high above. I left Charleston 3 weeks after that night. Took nothing with me but a few suitcases of clothes, a stack of finalized legal paperwork, and a folded map marked with places I'd never dared to dream of. The house I once decorated down to every detail, from the autumn-colored curtains to the perfectly hung family photos in the hallway, sold for a decent price. I never went back to pick up a single thing. I didn't need to. The things that once made me feel like I belonged had become evidence of a life I had borrowed. This cabin was the first listing I saw while scrolling a real estate site on a sleepless night. Small, 2 hours from the nearest town, sloped roof, old stove, and a stone fireplace. It didn't fit any version of home I had in my mind. But the moment I stepped inside, I didn't want to leave. I started a new job at a local arts foundation. Lower pay, no prestige, but it felt right. Each week, I helped organize drawing workshops for kids in the area, designed exhibit spaces for independent artists, and sometimes just sat quietly in the archive room, flipping through forgotten sketches. There was something about the rawness and honesty of art that began to heal me. No need for words, no need for explanations. I also began therapy. People say that betrayal in marriage doesn't just break your trust in others, it breaks your trust in yourself. I understand that now more than ever. Every time I remember the look in Nathan's eyes when I entered that party, not panic, not shame, but fear of losing control, I remind myself, I wasn't wronged for trusting, but I was right to stop. As for Nathan, I heard he was forced to sell his shares in his former company to cover legal costs. Longtime clients pulled out after the scandal leaked online through a video one of the bridesmaids had taken. He tried launching a small financial project in Seattle, but nothing's clear yet. Strangely, I don't care. Not because the pain is gone, but because I've stopped letting it dictate my direction. And Brooke? I heard from a source she left Charleston and moved back in with her parents in West Virginia. The family closed their church for 3 months after the scandal. The wedding was canceled, and her reputation in that small town was all but erased. I don't take joy in that, but I don't pity her either. Everyone is responsible for the path they choose. She chose hers, and it swallowed her whole. Lucas and I still keep in touch. There's nothing romantic. We're just two people who stood beside each other while our private worlds fell apart. There's a strange bond between us. Not love, but understanding. We exchange messages on even-numbered days, share photos of the rescue dog he adopted, talk about failed workouts or the pottery class I just tried. It's a quiet kind of connection, no pressure. Like we both know, as long as the other exists somewhere on the map, that's enough. Once, Lucas wrote, "We don't have to run from the past, Claire. We just have to stop living in it." I cried reading that, not because of the words, but because I knew I had started doing just that. I had stopped living in the shadow of the man once called my husband. I had stopped searching for excuses to forgive the unforgivable. And more importantly, I had started trusting my instincts again. The ones that were right all along, even when I tried to silence them. Today the weather turned crisp. I'd just hung new curtains in my little bedroom. Thick fabric with a loud floral pattern I never would have picked while living with Nathan. He always preferred neutrals. Everything had to be elegant and minimal. And me? I guess I'd forgotten what I actually liked. This afternoon, standing in the kitchen rinsing a mug, I heard the wind push through the pine trees behind the cabin. A quiet sound, low and steady, but clear enough to remind me. I am still alive. Not just existing, not just enduring, but truly alive. After that night, a lot of people asked me, "Weren't you scared?" Of course I was. I was terrified. I was afraid of being alone, of pitiful glances from others, of walking into a new life without a map. But then I realized, what's even scarier is living beside someone who's no longer real, and accepting what you know is wrong, just to preserve an image that already shattered long ago. Someone once told me a strong woman is someone who knows how to forgive. But now I believe a strong woman is someone who dares not to, who dares to walk away when trust is exploited, when patience is mistaken for permission, who says, "I gave you everything, but I don't owe you a single thing more." I don't count the days since I left Charleston. I don't check for updates on Nathan or Brooke. I don't need to know how they're living or what they're thinking, or whether they regret anything. They're no longer the center of this story. This story is mine, about finding myself in the wreckage, about learning that silence can be an answer, and about standing up not for revenge, but simply to keep going, in the way I choose. Am I still angry? Yes, the anger still comes, especially when I remember sitting alone at the dinner table, waiting for someone who texted, running late. Or the nights I wrapped his birthday gifts, not knowing he was in some hotel room, smiling at someone else. But the anger no longer swallows me whole. It comes and goes like rain through the trees. I let it pass, and I keep moving. Last night, Lucas texted. My younger brother asked me if I still believe in marriage. I said yes. But I don't believe in silence anymore. I read that message over and over. Then I replied, we all deserve a life we don't have to doubt. I know not everyone gets the chance to leave. Not everyone has the means to start over. But I believe everyone has the right to choose truth. To say, I don't accept this as normal, and if you're in a situation where you've been silent for too long, remember, silence is not your obligation. You don't have to endure just to protect something that no longer exists. My story doesn't have a grand finale, no dramatic turn where someone chases after me to say, I'm sorry. It's just a woman choosing her own curtains, brewing coffee the way she likes it, and slowly believing she deserves a life not worn thin by lies. And if you've listened this far, I want to ask you, are you living a life that truly feels like yours? Or are you holding on to something just because you once thought you had no choice? If you feel like sharing, leave a comment, not to expose, but to connect, because maybe, just maybe, your story will be the beginning of someone else's. And if this story touched something in you, don't forget to follow the channel. The next stories may not be perfect, but they will always be true. And sometimes truth alone is enough.